Hey everybody, we are going to move on to chapter 51 and we're going to talk today about animal behavior. So animals show both simple and complex behaviors. So before we get started, kind of as we go through this, we're going to hit on a few more like vocab type things just so you kind of are aware of what we're talking about. So behavior, what is it? It's what an animal does and also how it does it. Um, so it's a result of both genetic and environmental factors. Behavior is essential for survival and reproduction, but it's also subject to natural selection. So when we study behavior, we call that ethology. This is the study of animal behavior, and we tend to look at both proximate and ultimate causes of behavior. So the proximate cause is going to be answering the how questions. So that's focusing on the immediate stimulation and the mechanism for the behavior. Then the ultimate causes of behavior are the why questions. So this is going to focus on how the behavior contributes to survival and reproduction. So here we're looking at some stickleback fish. So the behavior that we're looking at is that a male stickleback fish attacks other male sticklebacks that invade its nesting territory. So now the proximate cause of this is the red belly of the intruding male acts as a sign stimulus that releases aggression in a male stickleback. Now, that's saying why it's happening right there in that moment. The ultimate cause, though, is that by chasing away other male sticklebacks, a male decreases the chance that eggs laid in his nesting territory will be fertilized by another male. So that's the ultimate cause. Another behavior would be that young geese follow an imprint on their mother. So the proximate cause of this, during an early critical development stage, the young geese observe their mother moving away from them and calling. And then the ultimate cause would be, on average, geese that follow an imprint on their mother receive more care, learn the necessary skills, and so have a greater chance of surviving than those that don't follow their mother. So beavers have a strong genetic component. They're unlearned and developmentally fixed behaviors. So we talk a lot about fixed action patterns, and this is going to be a sequence of unlearned and mostly unchangeable acts that are triggered by a sign stimuli. And migration is a really good example of that. We also have innate behaviors. So a kinesis is a simple change in behavior in response to a stimuli. And so here what you have is a little sow bug, and he's in a dry open area. And then you can see him here under a leaf in a moist site. Now, the sow bug is not going to walk in a straight line. So what happens is this kinesis increases the chance that the sow bug will encounter and stay in a moist environment. And so this is a simple change in behavior in response to a stimuli. So you've got this dry open area. So this sow bug sort of meanders around, and because he's meandering around and not just walking in one straight line, it increases the chance that he will encounter and then stay in that moist environment. A taxis then is an automatic movement to or from a stimuli. And so down here, you are looking at a fish. And so what happens is you can see here that we've got the direction of the river kind of pointing towards the fish. And so the fish is going to swim into the current. And that's really helpful because that's going to be the direction that the food is coming from. Circadian rhythms are really important. They occur on a daily cycle. Light can play a major role. Sometimes you can have longer cycles that can be triggered by different day length or lunar cycles. And so something to kind of pay attention to is how the sleep urge changes through this cycle, and then also when an organism sleeps, when he's awake, what happens to the sleep need, and then again once he sleeps. A signal is a behavior that causes a change in behavior of another organism. So you can have a chemical signal such as pheromones, a visual signal. So the example here would be, like what you see when a shark is coming, or auditory signals. So if you think of like birds or crickets or whales and the noises that they make, those are signals to other organisms. So environment interacting with an animal's genetic makeup influences the development of behaviors. So learning is the modification of behavior based on specific experiences. So you have imprinting, which is going to be a combination of learned and innate components. It's limited, though, to a sensitive period in the organism's life. So we talked about the geese earlier and how they imprint on their mother, and that happens very early. Habituation is the loss of responsiveness to a stimuli due to little or no information. Associative learning is the ability to associate one environmental feature to another. And so we're going to kind of show classical versus operant conditioning. So classical conditioning is associating a stimuli with a reward or a punishment, and then operant conditioning is when you would actually associate a behavior with a reward or a punishment. Cognition or insight is the ability to perceive, store, process, and use information. So we tend to think of this as much more complex, and this is, reasoning. Behavioral traits can evolve by natural selection. So one example is foraging behavior. This includes eating as well as the mechanisms used in searching for, recognizing, and capturing of food. The optimal foraging model is the most efficient way for organisms to obtain energy. So it takes into account energy spent and energy gains, and it's shaped by natural selection. Our natural selection favors behaviors that increase survival and reproductive success. So examples of this would be mating systems. So different organisms have different mating systems. So they could be promiscuous, monogamous, polygamous, and then under polygamy you've got two different kinds. So polygyny is when you have the single male, and then polyandry is when you have a single female, and then she would mate with several males. You also have agnostic behaviors. These are ritualized contests that determine which competitor gains access to a resource. That's what you're looking at right here. So relationship between mating system and female and male forms. So we've got three different examples here. In the first one, we're looking at trumpeter swans. These are a monogamous species, and so we say that they're often monomorphic. So males and females are difficult to distinguish just by looking at their external features. Here you have polygynous species like elk, and the male is going to be usually pretty ornamented for attracting mates. In a polyandrous species, down here, it tends to be the female that is going to be more ornamental than the male. Paternal care is very interesting topic in ecology. Here we're looking at paternal care by a male jawfish. And what's interesting about paternal care is paternal care actually increases when there's certainty of paternity. So typically we talk about maternal care and how much energy and time females put forth in raising the young. Because especially if you're talking about mammals are a really good example because of the long gestational period. Females are putting lots of time and energy into that. Maternity is certain because they are carrying the young and then go through the birthing process, whereas paternity is not always certain. But if you have really high certainty of paternity, so in this case, that is pretty high, and anytime you have external fertilization, in cases like this with the jawfish, so if males can be certain of their paternity, then they often tend to increase the amount of paternal care, which makes sense that they would only put forth that much time and energy if they are certain that they are helping to care for offspring that carry their genes. Okay, so now we're going to look at inclusive fitness and altruism. So altruism is when animals behave in ways that reduce their individual fitness, but increases the fitness of other individuals in the population. So inclusive fitness then is the total effect an individual has on proliferating its genes by producing offspring, then aiding and protecting them, as well as close relatives. All right, and so this is when you tend to see organisms that are helping to care for, it could be siblings, or it could be other relatives, or it could be their offspring, and it's the amount of care that they would give, which they're spending time and energy and effort helping other organisms, and so by doing that they would kind of reduce their own fitness. So the natural selection that causes this altruistic behavior is called kin selection. And we have Hamilton's rule in kin selection. So William Hamilton was an evolutionary biologist, and he proposed a quantitative measure for predicting when natural selection would favor altruistic behavior. And so in that case, we're looking at three variables. So R is the coefficient of relatedness. So how related are the individuals? One being the one who's performing these altruistic behaviors. How related is that individual to who he's helping? B is the benefit to the recipient, and then C is the cost to the altruist. And so essentially, we would tend to see altruistic behavior if the coefficient of relatedness times the benefit to the recipient is greater than the cost to the altruist. So if the recipient is benefiting a lot and they're very closely related, and the behavior isn't really hurting the altruist, then you would tend to see more altruistic behavior. So your lecture question for today, why would animals only show altruistic behavior under certain circumstances? So what we just talked about, why is altruism not something that happens all the time by all kinds of different organisms? Why is it only under certain circumstances? So please send me an answer to that question through the class website. Thanks, guys.